The worst movies of 2022. This is my top 10 list of the movies that I saw this year that absolutely stunk, in my opinion. Now, as you guys can see, I'm clearly in the holiday spirit with my Santa hat and my ugly Christmas sweater. If you guys don't know, it's bend over and I'll show you. My girlfriend has the "Where are you gonna put a tree that big?" from National Lampoon's Vacation, a joint ugly Christmas sweater, and I thought I'd wear that because it's the holidays and we're talking about the bad movies of the year. Now, quick disclaimer, I just gotta say that I haven't seen absolutely every single movie in 2022. So, for example, Morbius will not be on this list. I saw the trailer and I'm like, I refuse. I do not want to watch that movie. Still haven't. Probably never will. And I also gotta let you guys know that this is just my own personal opinion. So if you love any movie on this list, more power to you. You guys are allowed to love any movie that you want for any reason. These are just the ones that I personally really didn't like. And thank you to my partners at Movie Scene Canada for all of these screenings this year, even though these ones were not the most enjoyable. So let's get started with number 10. At number 10, we have Blonde. Now, the reason why this movie's on the list is because it is long, it is self-indulgent, it's confusing, it's pretentious, it's so far up its own ass, and it's exploitative. The movie actually does the very thing that it argues against. It tells us the story of how Marilyn Monroe was always exploited her entire life and how wrong it was, and yet the movie does the exact same thing. Ana de Armas gives a good performance, but it's not enough to save this stinker. 3 hours long of a stinker. Number 9 is Deep Water, another Ana de Armas movie. Now, this movie made me angry. And I always say that if you end up screaming at the TV because of the character's incompetence, lack of intelligence, or lack of self-respect, then you're in a really, really bad place. Ana de Armas in this movie was absolutely awful. Super hypersexualized that it almost becomes comical, and there's no direction. Absolutely no direction in her performance, and Ben Affleck just looks bored in the movie. He just feels like he doesn't want to be there. It's self-centered, and yes, Ben Affleck, I'd rather be somewhere else as well. Number 8, we have 3,000 Years of Longing. At number 7, we have The Man from Toronto. Now, this movie commits the cardinal sin for Canadians. Okay, so Toronto, the biggest city in Canada, except no one in the movie actually has a Canadian accent. The Canadian accent, it's Toronto, not Toronto, and yet everyone from Toronto says Toronto in the movie anyways. And this is an action comedy with bad action and bad comedy. The Kevin Hart routine is just old and tired. I don't care for it anymore. It feels recycled. The story feels recycled. The comedy feels extremely forced. And the biggest sin of all is that Kevin Hart and Woody Harrelson, our two leads, have absolutely zero chemistry. Number 6, The 355. Now, I've never left a press screening before in my life because I go there to the movie for free to review the movie. But, oh man, part of me was like, is this even worth it? I wanted to actually walk out of this movie. I didn't. Oh, but maybe it should have been better for my mental health if I did. But thank God this movie actually has a really good group of actors with a lot of chemistry to kind of save this movie from just being really, really, really far down on this list. Because this movie has no energy. The action is mind-numbing. The story is cliched and tiresome and extremely unoriginal. The dialogue is cringeworthy. The plot is boring. And the cinematography is absolutely awful. I didn't know what I was looking at half the time. At number 5, we have Interceptor. Now, this movie is just laughable. This movie is so cliche, it should have been a Saturday morning cartoon show. And not in a fun way either. I've watched movies where there's a ton of schlock and it's very cheesy, very campy, but that's the charm of it. This movie did not have any charm whatsoever. And Elsa Pataky, she holds her own in the action sequences, but she, let's be honest, is just bad. Now, the villain actually did have a motivation that I could get behind, and this movie actually did have a budget, but the script was just atrocious. And for an action film, it is way, way, way too boring. Way too boring. Number 4, we have The King's Daughter. Now, what sucks about this movie is that I do think that you actually have a good movie in here. You have a good story, you have some good actors, and you have a great location. However, just the execution of it was just awful. Some of the worst pacing and editing I've ever seen in a movie. Because generally speaking, when a character has a really impactful line, there's a little bit of breathing room to let that line sink in. But not in this movie. As soon as the person's done talking, next scene. As soon as the person's done talking, next scene. There's no breathing room. There's no room for the impactful moments to actually leave an impact. So there isn't any impact in this movie. The cinematography is disorienting. The saturation is just so overblown. It looks like an Instagram photo. And my best way to describe this movie is like a live action straight to DVD Barbie movie with worse editing. That's The King's Daughter. Number 3 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, I went off in my review for this movie because I'm sick and tired of the just current day politics creeping into absolutely every single movie. Now, I had a conversation with somebody I know. I was telling them about this, about how there's a group of like woke teenagers or young adults on this bus, and then of course Leatherface comes in and kills them with the chainsaw, and he's like, oh, that's awesome, I want to see that. And people in the comment section are going, this movie's amazing because it pokes fun at both political parties. And my point is, why in the world are we having this discussion about current day woke politics, identity politics, whatever the case may be, in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie on Netflix? Just get this garbage out of here. Not only that, the movie's not scary and the characters are just dumb. This one really pissed me off. At number 2, we have Medieval. Now, I've seen this movie before. It was extremely boring. It left no emotional impact on me, but I honestly can't even tell you what happened in that movie because the story was so hard to follow because I was just... Things are happening, and there's a little bit of action here. Should get excited? No? Okay. It's shot terribly? Okay. It was like watching paint dry. And number 1 is Pinocchio. This is the Robert Zemeckis Disney Plus live-action remake with Tom Hanks' Pinocchio. And the number 1 reason why this is the worst film of the year, and quite possibly one of the worst films I've ever seen, is that it's insulting. I can stand watching these movies because they're bad. Sure, the action in the action scenes are not great for action movies. The comedy in the comedy movies is not funny. The scariness in a horror movie is not scary. Sure, the film's just not very good at its job. In this movie, it's just insulting. Because the core message of the movie gets completely changed, and it gets preachy. It gets pretentious. It feels like it's talking down to the audience. And that, I'm sorry, is inexcusable. Terrible performances. A terrible story. Terrible songs. Tom Hanks is laughable in this movie. It's like he's playing children's theater. But the core of this movie is so lost that the movie is unforgivable. And I said this in my review too. You are allowed to like any movie for any reason. So if you love this movie, more power to you, but we cannot talk about movies because we see movies in just a completely different way. I hate that movie so much. This one is on a whole other level of just, like, it's below garbage. It's underneath the landfill. It is one of the worst films I've ever seen. So that's my list. But I'm curious to know, what are your top 10 worst films of the year in 2022? However, what are my best films of the year? Well, that video is coming out real soon, and if it is, then it'll be on the end screen, so make sure you click that video so that you know my best films of the year, because you want to watch those movies as opposed to these ones. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys missed these movies this year, or if you did watch them, hopefully you enjoyed them better than I did. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.